Why should you visit thechairshot.com? Thechairshot.com is your home for hard-hitting reviews, news, opinion, and analysis with attitude. Why? Because you're smarter than the average fan. Thechairshot.com. Always use your head.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Kurt's Angle. It's Kate Johansson, and today bringing you another special interview coming off the back of the From the Ground Up series I've been doing with Reach Wrestling and their academy. He's arguably one of the kings of wrestling in the southwest of England, in the Devon area. It's the English Lion, Eddie Ryan. Eddie, thank you for joining us.
That's all right. Thanks for having me.
Now, really excited, especially from seeing you work over the years and everybody that I've interviewed from the Reach Academy. They've all just had such great stuff to say about yourself whenever you've been interacting with them, giving them advice. So really interested to see learn more about your career really, and let people know who Eddie Ryan really is.
Excellent. So
just to delve straight in, why wrestling? It's one career you've got to be really committed to. When was the first time you thought, you know what, I want to be a professional wrestler?
When I was a kid, I was obsessed with wrestling. My first memory of wrestling was WrestleMania 4. I had the double box tape my dad brought back from the video rental place, and we sat around watching it. I just remember being about 6 inches from the TV, just mesmerized. And I've always been a huge Macho Man fan, but that was really where I sort of got started with wrestling. Used to watch a lot of World of Sport with my granddad. He was Spanish, so we didn't really communicate all that much. But I just remember being sat on his knee watching some World of Sport when I was younger. But in terms of when did I decide that I was going to be a wrestler, it was never really anything that I thought that you could just do. I never really put any thought into it. I played football from the age of 11 until I was about 21, and you play football and you get trials, and I never put any thought into how do you become a wrestler. And so I was at university, and that kind of opened my eyes to, I don't just want to do a normal desk job for the rest of my life. And I had a conversation with my mum, and I was just, I don't know what to do with the next part of my life. And she was like, well, you always love wrestling. Why don't you become a wrestler? And so I started looking into it a bit more, obviously, with the internet opening up the channels to look into that type of stuff. I just started looking for training schools, and that's where it snowballed from there pretty much.
So It's funny you say with your mum, a lot of people that I speak to, and it's so how did your parents take it? My mum didn't like it. She didn't like to see me getting hurt, but here's your mum encouraging you. So what was the process trying to find a school, one that's in touching distance, when you first started it had been a lot harder, but two, to know this is a serious school, because you hear all the horror stories of carny academies, essentially, shall we say. So what was your experience like first stepping through the door?
So I started looking into wrestling in 2007 is when I started looking into it. So again, in the Southwest, there really wasn't anything. I was Googling a lot, and I came across a local training school based in Brixham, which is about half an hour, 45-minute drive through the countryside from Plymouth. And I went there, and I remember turning up, and it was just a tired, beat up old ring in the middle of a sports hall, really. But I was so excited to just give it a go, because in my head I thought, I've always been an all or nothing type of person. It was like that with football. If you haven't got any natural ability in it, then you just kind of maybe move on. So I just wanted to see if I could do the basics, and if I picked it up quickly, and then go from there. So I went there and took a few bumps and ran the ropes a bit, and felt that I can do this. And then luckily, on my second training session, Joel Redman came down to help train some of the guys, because effectively it was a backyard promotion in a building. So he came down and he wanted to help and put us all through our paces. Now, I'd obviously just come off the back of over a decade of football, so my cardio and things like that were pretty good. So he was pushing me along, and at the end of the session, he took me to one side and said, you have some good potential, but you need to go somewhere and get properly trained. You can't stay here. Yeah. And he gave me some contacts. He gave me UK Kid in Portsmouth, VPW. He gave me WAW, the Nights Out in Norwich, and he gave me Dave Sharp in Swindon with 4FW. He gave me the contacts for them, and just started getting in contact with the places, really, and starting opening doors.
Yeah. Now, that's good for him to do that. Like, again, he's just coming in to help out. He sees you for the first time and essentially put his name on the back of it. Like, hey, you should go for these. And so he said you could cope, like, with cardio-wise because of football. However, like, even I've done it. People that we've spoke to who's gone from one sport to another. How did you cope with that transition? Because you've got football shape and football cardio, but then you've got in-ring cardio.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things I'm not looking forward to at the end of this lockdown. Is that my ring shape is going to be terrible by the end of this, because there's nothing like wrestling. But in terms of how did I cope? I mean, at the start, a lot of training schools, if they're any good, they do drill you a little bit. They put you through your fitness and that type of thing. And that's one of the things that Joel was always so high on. If you've ever met Joel and you watch him work, his work rate is unlike anything else. And so he does push you through. And that was something that I picked up from 4FW as well. So in turning up in terms of like fitness, where they're making you do, like jogging around, sprints, squats, press-ups, that's all the stuff that I brought in from another sport. In terms of in-ring cardio, when you first start out and you start doing the drills, and you have a better level of fitness maybe than others, but it still hits you pretty hard. But that's something that you build up over time, and you can only build that up by doing it every day or regularly, not just something you do once a week or once a month or something. That's something you build up over time.
Yeah. Now, when I first saw you, I think like I'm up in the north of England, so I think the first time I'd seen you would have been the 5-star wrestling stuff, which we'll get into later.
Sure.
But first thing I thought was, God, this guy's a specimen. Like, like physically, like you look the part. And I was like, okay, let's see. Like, is he going to be just another body guy, or is he going to be somebody that can go in the ring? And you can do that as well. You've got the technical side. What is that something you've put on and developed during wrestling, or was you always quite a weightlifting kind of kid when playing football?
No, if I was to show you a picture of me before the age of 22 when I first got into wrestling, you would probably not even recognize that it was me. I was I was probably 11 stone wet through. I was very skinny, very gangly. I was built for a lot of running effectively for football. And it was, I've always sort of thought my genetics, both of my parents are slight in build. So me putting weight on is hard work and takes a considerable amount of time. So I just knew that when I got into wrestling, I just wanted to be good technically, because a lot of the people that I idolized when I grew up were good technical wrestlers. And then over a period of time, again, people like Joel and Chris Andrews, who are people that they were the people that guided me out of the Southwest, much like when you said about the Reach guys saying about how I helped them. I'm only doing what people had done before me, so Joel and Chris. And at the time, like they were in such incredible shape, and I just knew that in talking to people, if you wanted to be taken seriously, you had to attract their attention straight away. And I'm a firm believer of, like if you're a wrestler, you need to look the part. Only you can invest in yourself. So, if you go out there out of shape, in tatty gear, you're going to get dismissed by everyone straight away. If you turn up with gear that you've obviously spent some good money on, that's good quality, and you are in shape, immediately the people in attendance, much like what you said there, you're like, okay, this guy looks like he takes it seriously. This guy looks like what he's supposed to look like. So effectively, I'm only doing what I feel that people should be doing. But because maybe other people don't, it means people like myself stand out because, I make sure that I buy good gear. I make sure I'm in shape. I make sure that everything about the package that is Eddie Ryan is exactly what I want it to be.
Yeah. Well, let's jump straight into that package then, because again, not only visually look brilliant, you mentioned it yourself, you put your time and effort making sure you're not wearing tatty gear. You're coming out, you've got like the cape hanging down, not a traditional cape that everybody seems to have these days. You've got the lion like helmet as well. Like, tell us a bit more about how you came to being that person.
Before I went off to America, back in 2011, I went to America, and at the time, the British wrestling scene was very much in a very big dip. It wasn't a good scene at the time, and so I thought going elsewhere to get experience, it wouldn't hinder me in any way because I wasn't missing out on anything, so to speak, here. So I just remember thinking that we're a country of British people, so how do I make myself different to every other guy who is a British guy in this country? And I'm very proud of my country. I'm very proud of my heritage, and I just started doing some research into effectively English history, and it really sort of boiled down to like conquering the world, people like Richard the Lionheart and things like that, and just looking into those type of things, and obviously the lion being a big motif of being British, and it was really just taking little bits, and that's effectively what the Eddie Ryan character is. It's England was an empire once upon a time, and we conquered the world, and we own so much of it. That's effectively what it boils down to. I want to conquer the wrestling world. So, like you don your war paint, so to speak, and off you go. So that's really the basis of it. And then you just build up on top. And again, when you step through that curtain, you've got 5 seconds to make people make a decision about you, like whether they like you or you're not. Very much the same principle as like the Legion of Doom or people like that. When they come out, you're over like, I like that guy or I don't like that guy. And you've got 5 seconds to make people think that, and if you come out and you're just a guy in trunks and you just shout, come on, or yeah, or whatever, if you've been to enough shows, you've seen it. If you're just that guy, then you're just another one of the people on the show. If you come out with a lion mask on, immediately people are like, oh, okay, this is different, and some people don't like it, but the general consensus is that's cool. And like when I'm at the end of the show doing the meet and greets or at the merch table, people want to come and see it and touch it and hold it because it's interesting to them. And that's really it. It's just, again, trying to get that whole package, trying to get that attention and stand out on a show where you've got 10, 12 people. How do you get that attention immediately? Like there are people that can probably do, like 450s and things like that I can't do. But there are other things that I can control that I can do that maybe others can't. And if I can come out and just immediately attract that attention, then I've done my job and I'm off to the races from there.
Yeah. So going back to what Joel said, he gave you a couple of training schools, including WAW and 4FW. 4FW essentially being like your home in professional wrestling since you first started. So I'm guessing that's the company you went straight to do the training with?
Not immediately, no. WAW was something that I wanted to look into, but like Plymouth to anywhere in the country is a long way, but Plymouth to Norwich is just so far.
Yeah.
And so I did inquire into it, but it was kind of like it was the third option, and that's nothing against them personally. It's just purely from a
geographical standpoint.
Yeah, it was just such a long way away from where I was. So the first one I actually looked into was VPW in Portsmouth. They were running shows all along the south coast, so they did the Exmouth Pavilion, and I went there to just help out and help build the ring and help set up and sort of get a foot in the door, really. And I met the promoter and just said about what I was trying to do, and obviously Joel had recommended me, so that sort of set me in good standing. And so the next day, because they VPW used to bring in a lot of ex-WWE guys, and they had D'Lo Brown on the show at the time, who wasn't too far off of being in WWE. So the next day in Portsmouth at the Guildhall, they were actually doing a training session. Now, I'd probably only done 5 or 6 training sessions at that point. And Tom was very kind to say, if you come and help out, you're more than welcome to join in. So I went there and did some work and some training with D'Lo. And again, he had some praise for me and my general athleticism and some kind words. And so I had done some stuff with VPW, but the unfortunate thing is that Tom was he didn't really have a solid base for his training school at the time. And he was sort of just planning to sort of get it running again. So at the time, it just was bad timing. And so I did go and help out at some shows with VPW, but then because of the school situation, I then got in contact with Dave at 4FW and started pursuing it from there, really.
So how long had you been training before getting that first match then?
My first match at 4FW was in December 2008. So the training school in Devon only did training once a week on Sundays, and even then sometimes that wasn't even training. It was they would film just like their own show, so to speak. So it was sporadic at best, and then I had my uni commitments and I had to work and things like that every now and again. So really, so I started there sort of the late 2017, and that's when I met Joel. And so I moved to Swindon in October 2008 after I finished university. And so it was October, so 2 months before I got my first show match with 4FW.
Yeah. Now that's dedication. Like, you've uprooted your entire life just to go training.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thought process behind that?
To be honest, there wasn't a great deal of thought that went behind. As I said earlier, it's with a lot of the things I do in my life, it's all or nothing. I either do it fully or I don't do it at all. I'm not really one to half-ass things. So once I started getting all this good feedback from people and people say, you could be good at this if you dedicate yourself to it. In my head, I'd already made the mind up that I was going to do this 100%. And so I was just waiting really to finish university and then start to work out how to move on to the next bit. And and that was it really. It went as far as that. Just saved up some money, worked through the summer, saved up some money, and then just moved to Swindon in October. And the best part about 4FW is that they were doing training 5 times a week. A lot of the people that I meet in wrestling, they tend to start when they're like 16, 18, things like that. And I was 22, so in my head, I had to play catch up. And training 5 times a week was amazing for me because I just wanted to be wrestling as much as physically possible just to get ahead. So I was there every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then all day on a Sunday. So I was just all in straight away. It was just very much just, I'm doing this, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to get to where I want to go.
So how does it feel like, for me, like I mentioned earlier, like yourself and Joel, two of the cornerstones of like the Southwest wrestling, and with 4FW, you'd had a match with Joel just before going to America, I believe. Was that your first like match with Joel in front of an audience? And what was that like? Somebody that believed in you and you kind of looked up to then be across the ring from him?
I think that was actually the first time we ever wrestled, actually. I would have to check the diary, but I think that is the first time. But Joel has always been a benchmark in terms of something to strive for. He has a work ethic like no other, and that can be seen in the way that he works in the ring and the way that he looks. And like if you want to be the best, you have to be better than the person who is the best.
Yeah.
And like to strive to be as good as him has always been something I've wanted to achieve. And so, to get in there with him, it's a test, because an adage in wrestling is you work up to someone's level, that person doesn't work down to yours. So he was, at the time, I think that was it might have been one of his last matches before he went off to NXT. I would have to check that, but I'm pretty sure he went off to America shortly after that. And so for me, it was an opportunity for me to get in there and see how I compared to him, and just like once you know what your level is, and then you get in there and you're like, okay, I need to work on this and this in order to get to his level. It sort of sets that process in motion for yourself, really. But yeah, it was great. And since he come back, and over the past couple of years, we've really had the opportunity to work more and just really sort of get matches and chemistry down properly. And there's been some matches that we've had that people won't ever see that were incredible. And I'll never turn down working with Joel. There are some days where you just know you've got to have your work boots on, and maybe you're not feeling it, or maybe you're not 100%, but every time you're in there with Joel, he's going to make you earn it, and he's going to make you work for it. And that's something that everyone should do. You should never have like a bad day or an off day, and when people are paying ticket money to watch you wrestle, because it's only your own reputation that you destroy if you do that.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, like you went to America and you started changing your name.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thought process behind that? Because when I was speaking to one of the Academy guys, Jackson, a lot of that was about talking about his character and trying to find himself, essentially. And you've had the Eddie Ryan, Eddie Reyes, and I believe Tony Bauer as well.
Yeah, that's in Japan, yeah.
So let's talk about the Eddie Reyes to Eddie Ryan transition.
Okay.
Like, how's it been trying to find who you are? Because again, you've used Tony Bauer in Japan, you started Eddie Ryan in America, but you also did the Eddie Reyes stuff.
Yeah, so when I first started at 4FW, Dave, basically the two people who ran 4FW and the trainers were David Sharp and JD Knight, and they were great to me, and they really did teach me so much. And the thing with Dave is he liked to have international flavor on his shows. Now, my family, the heritage I come from, as I said earlier, my granddad didn't speak much English just because he was Spanish, and he came over here during World War II and lived here, but never really learned English because he was just a stubborn Spanish man. And my dad was born in Spain as well. And so my real last name is Spanish. And so Dave really wanted me to be Spanish so that he could have like a Spanish like flag on posters and things like that, and he thought that would be a good way to set me apart. And so he sort of just gave me but not so much gave me, but we sat down and he was like, like, you should be Spanish, and we sat down and we started talking about names. And that's how the Eddie Reyes thing came up. I was a massive Eddie Guerrero fan, so the Eddie was always something that I wanted to use, and the Reyes came from Jose Antonio Reyes, so and so that's how it was formed. It was just sort of thrown together, and it wasn't really my idea, but it was, when you listen to your trainer and you look up to him, you do as you're told, and you just assume that he's looking out for the best thing for you. And so over a period of time, you start to settle into yourself, so to speak. And my Spanish isn't the best, so having to keep up that facade really is more effort than it was. And you hear lots of people say things like your best character is yourself turned up to 10. And that wasn't me. And it just got to a point on shows where I wasn't enjoying doing that. And I wanted to do something more natural, more than that interested me, so to speak. And so on the way to the airport to go to America, obviously America having a large Hispanic population, I knew I was going to get rumbled. So we started talking. Me and Dave was dropping me to Heathrow to go and catch my flight, and we were talking, and I said I wanted to change my name, and I basically wanted to come back. As I said, the wrestling scene in the UK was so down at the time. No one was going to pay any attention to me changing my name or my gimmick, really. Yeah. So I thought it was just a way to refresh. So on the way to the airport, like I wanted to keep. I had a pair of boots that had ER on them, so I wanted to keep the last name beginning with R. And my best friend's first name is Ryan, so just went with Eddie Ryan, and it stuck from there. And just went to America while I was there. Someone pointed out that Ryan and Lion rhymed, and so the English Lion thing came, and that was it. But the Tony Bauer thing, I went to Japan in 2012, not long after I got back from America, really, and Zero One had a habit of changing people's names. I don't know why, but when you're there, you just do as you're told. Again, I was still very new, and so got there, and they said that I looked like a movie star, and they started saying something about Jack Bauer from 24.
See, that did come up into my mind when I came across the Tony Bauer thing. I was like,
yeah,
is that going to be Jack Bauer?
yeah, it was, and I don't know where the Tony came from, but they just said you're Tony Bauer. And to be fair, I don't know if you watched I think it was the Cruiserweight Classic, but there was an Australian there called Damian Slater. He was there with me at 01 at the time, and they changed his name to Ocean Neal. And there was another guy in the Cruiserweight Classic, I believe his name was Jason Lee from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
He was from he was at 01 at the same time I was then, and they changed his name to something silly as well. I can't remember what it was, but they just changed everyone's names, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was kind of the WWE sort of theory, but yeah, they changed our names. And so while I was there, I was Tony Bauer, and I didn't really understand it, but okay. Just get on, you just go there and you just train and you just do as you're told.
Yeah, man, like, especially you're there working in Cork and Hall, like, before we go back to America, like, how did Japan come about? How did 01 come about? And again, on everyone's bucket list, there's Tokyo Dome, but there's Cork and Hall. And early in your career, you've done that. So how was all that?
Oh, it was incredible. The door for America opened up because Dave had a guy called John Walters who was in ROH. He came over in 2009 and he stayed with us for 3 months. And to repay the favor, he said he would take one of Dave's trainees over to America if they ever wanted to go. And so I had always wanted to go to Boston, which is where John lived. And so I went there for 5 weeks and stayed with John, and he took me around to shows. But while I was there, my trainer, Dave, he dropped me a message. We stayed in contact, and he said that, would I be interested in going to Japan? And I said, absolutely. And Dave had always been a huge fan of Japanese wrestling, so he had a lot of fingers in pies with promotions. So there were trainees that went to Kaientai Dojo and Michinoku Pro. And so I don't know exactly how Dave opened the door for that, but he's like, do you want to go? And I was like, 100%. I'd like to go and just learn and just get all sorts of styles, learn and just absorb everything that I could. And so that was it. He opened that door for me, and he just said, let me know when you want to go. And so I got back from America in October, and then in January I'm off to Japan. So but yeah, the whole Japan thing was great. It was amazing to be treated like a proper athlete. You get given a tracksuit, and when you go to shows, you go on a bus, and you're treated like a proper athlete, and the respect shown to you. But you've got to work hard. The training there was some of the hardest I've ever done in my life. But you start mingling with some Japanese legends, and I got to do a tag with Masato Tanaka, so to work with him. I mean, the first day I got to Japan was in itself a hard day. I remember turning up. I'd been on a plane for pretty much 16 hours and got picked up at the airport, and by that time, I'd been awake for nearing something like 20 hours or longer. I just needed to go to sleep, and by that time it was early afternoon, and they had a dojo show later that evening. And so I get picked up, and they were like, do you want to watch the dojo show? And I was absolutely. And I assumed they would take me to the house so that I could sleep for a bit and come back out, but they just kept me in the dojo for the rest of the day. And so I'm trying to keep myself awake and meet all the managers and everything. And so the dojo show happens, and it's just filmed at the training dojo. Effectively, it's just kind of like a house show, and I'm sat at the back. I'm trying to keep myself awake, but by this time I've been awake for like maybe 30 hours. It's incredible, and I just need to sleep. And at the end of the show, Tanaka and Hidaka come to me and they said, please train. Obviously, the communication was difficult at the time, so I thought maybe train tomorrow. I was like, no, now. So I had to go and find my knee pads and basically roll around for 5 minutes with Tanaka. And 5 minutes in, I'm just mat wrestling with him. And after 5 minutes, he just breaks and looks at me, says something in Japanese to Hidaka, and Hidaka says, tomorrow you're on a show. And that was it.
Wow.
And so I'd obviously been trained well in my fundamentals for them to sort of come to that decision so quickly, and it was a very overwhelming experience, and like you're half asleep, and it all seems a little bit like a dream. And so luckily me, Damien and Jason were kind of like the three standout trainees while we were there, and they took us for sponsor meals, and it was amazing. And went to the New Japan physios and New Japan pies and things. It was an amazing 6 weeks, and they wanted me to stay for the full 3 months, but at the time I had a job and I couldn't take any more time off. And I've always been in contact with them since then, and it's always something that I wanted to look back into doing. But with the revival of the British wrestling scene, it's kind of been something that's been difficult because there's a lot of opportunity for us here at the moment, and I don't want to lose the momentum that I had gained over, that time from 2016. So, but I'm sure that after all this lockdown, that it's going to take a while to get going again. So maybe that door might open again, but who knows?
So if that door does open again, are you going to be the English Lion Eddie Ryan, or are you going to be Tony Bauer? The people want the return of Tony Bauer.
Obviously, I would like to go there under my current name. I think that the way that Japan is, they love gimmicks and they love things like that. So I think the Lion Mask would be well received there. But if they demand Tony Bauer, then I've got to give them Tony Bauer.
Well, 24 is not big right now, so it'll probably be like Jack. It'll probably be like Jack Ryan or something. At least you get to keep your last name.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, you've got such momentum in the UK, and so many companies have entrusted you with being their main champion and leading the brand. And that came shortly after your time in America and Japan, I believe, with 4FW, with your first title reign.
Yeah.
How was that feeling for you? Like, to be, I guess, entrusted with the keys of the kingdom. You're representing the company, and I'm sure it's something you've grown to get used to now. But how was that to begin with?
It's always an honor when a promoter wants to make you their champion, because obviously in their head, this is their baby, and they've got this vision and things like that. And if they see you as being the number one in their company, as the draw, so to speak, the people that the person that the people react most for, or want to come and see the most, then it's always humbling, and it's always an honor. I'll never be like, oh great, another championship belt. Like sometimes it's a bit awkward to have to remember which belt belongs to which promotion on which booking day that you have to take. But at the end of the day, being someone's champion is, they see that much in you that how could it not be an honor? So it is always appreciated when a promoter comes to you and says, we'd like to make you our champion, our face of the promotion and things like that. But I remember when I came back from Japan and, my physique was starting to improve, and Dave, my promoter, my trainer and promoter, he was like, we want to make you our champion and give you the opportunity to work with people that we bring in. Effectively, what they did with Hogan, they brought people in to work with Hogan so that he could, build his reputation, so to speak. And that's effectively what Dave wanted to do for me. And obviously, when I turned up at 4FW, the first goal, the first hurdle was to be champion of my promotion. And so when I did that, it was a massive milestone for me at the time, I won't lie. And so, it was a very proud moment for me, and a lot of people were happy for me and knew how hard I had worked at that point. So it was the first tick on the box, so to speak. I did, obviously, after traveling to different countries to wrestle. But yeah, it was a great feeling.
Yeah, you've wrestled so many different people, like a who's who of like British wrestling, really, with Shah
Hmm.
Samuels and
Hmm.
Johnny Storm, Doug Williams, people like that. But
Hmm.
what was it like facing Ultimo Dragon?
That was quite an experience. He was such a nice man. He was always so well dressed, and uh, yeah, I remember that match. It was me and Jason Larusso, my old tag partner, against Ultimo Dragon and Zack Sabre Jr. I remember that. That was in this beautiful, almost like town hall in somewhere in Bristol, and it wasn't. He speaks very very good English, so that made it a lot easier. But like when you meet someone who in himself has obviously been champion of everywhere that he's been, if you've seen that picture of him holding every belt on, and so he's obviously very well respected. I grew up really watching WCW because my family didn't have a great deal of money, so we didn't have Sky to be able to watch WWF. So really, it was just WCW or what we could get for free. So having seen someone that you had watched for so many years on TV and get the opportunity to learn from him. That's what a lot of these experiences are, just to see how you match up with these people and test yourself against them, and just learn from what they have to offer you. But it was again a sort of a surreal experience because it was one of the first people that I worked with that I had seen on TV. So it was surreal, and it was one of those things where when you go home later that day, especially even now that I'm actually talking about it, I just like to think about it. Me in a tag match against Zack Sabre Jr., who's arguably one of the best wrestlers in the world now, and Ultimo Dragon in a town hall with probably 100 people in is the strangest thing to say. But at the time, it was another thing to learn from and another experience, and you take away what these people have to teach you, and it was an incredible experience to work with them.
Well, whilst on the subject of like the tag team wrestling and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, you teamed up with a friend of mine, Nathan Cruz, for All Star against Hiromu Takahashi and
Mm-hmm.
Kenbai, two people that
Mm-hmm.
have gone on to make their names. But at that point in time, they're making their excursions to the UK.
Mm-hmm.
One, what was it like working like with All Star, but two, working again with that language barrier to people that are essentially new to the career in Takahashi and Kenbai?
Mm-hmm. Working for All Star was always an honor. One of the oldest promotions in the country. So many people who went on to legendary careers had sort of plied their trade through there, and that's the places like All Star, Welsh Wrestling, and effectively touring promotions that run regular shows every week. That's where you really learn how to wrestle and where you learn how to work, because you're there, you're doing it. A lot of the matches aren't like you don't plan a great deal backstage. You get up there and you feel the crowd, you learn to interact with the crowd, you learn what brings the crowd up and you learn what takes the crowd down, and the what's best for shows and things like that. And you don't have to worry so much about the crazy moves or the silly spots. So working for All Star is always an honor, and it's always a place to learn, because they still have so many people on those shows that have so much to teach people like James Mason and Tony Spitfire, and people like Joel, who's their champion, and other people that they bring in. It's always a great experience and a great feeling backstage to be around these people. But yeah, it's just as many matches as you can get with All Star and Welsh Wrestling and places like that is where you learn your craft and how you get so much better at what you do. But with regards to Kenbai and Takahashi, what you wouldn't know is that when they came to the UK, they were staying with 4FW. That's why they came for the excursion. Again, Dave had those links opened up, and they were actually living with me at the time. So I actually lived with them the entire 3 months that they were in the UK, and I was responsible for driving them around, because obviously they didn't have anywhere else to go. So I was basically their chauffeur and hotelier, and in fact, that's how it all came to be. I got to know Takahashi a little more than I did Kenbai. Kenbai was a lot quieter than Takahashi. Takahashi was a ball of energy, and it doesn't surprise me at all that he's gone on to the career that he has in New Japan. To be honest, it was a shame when I heard that he sustained his neck injury, but it's good to see him back up and running again. So, but yeah, it is difficult, but you'd be surprised how universal the language of wrestling is, and a lot of the words translate, and you can communicate it, a lot of it by feel, and just when you're out there, and it's easy. You just have to simplify it really, rather than, sometimes you start calling a spot in the match, which can be quite wordy. You learn how to make that as simple as possible, and especially backstage, the best thing to do in those sort of circumstances is, if you don't think someone will know what you're doing, tell them before, and if they still don't get it, then just scrap it. But if they do, then then stick with it and just find a way to make it as easy to communicate as possible. But as I say, wrestling is a lot of it by feel, so you can just tell by the way someone moves that sometimes this is where we're going with it, and things like that. So you would be surprised at how easy it is to communicate.
Yeah. I get what you mean. Like, you just get by. I think it'd been about 4 years ago. I was living in Tanzania.
Okay.
Living with a family that couldn't speak English, but somehow I'd still be able to communicate for the 3 months I was there. So, I get that completely.
Yeah.
So obviously we mentioned Johnny Larusso earlier. So what's your thought process on tag team wrestling then, and the contrast between tag team wrestling and singles? Because you've been such a successful tag wrestler with Johnny as the Lionhearts.
The thing I like most about tag wrestling is that it is so much easier to tell a story in tag wrestling, because the story is so much more simplified. One of the partners gets cut off from his tag partner and beaten down, and you make people want to see that tag. A lot of singles wrestling, you get the highs and lows, but effectively the biggest pop that you want, or whether it be a yay or a boo, is the finish of the match. And that's what you want to hook people into. With tag wrestling, it's, you want them to pop for that hot tag. You want to make them want that as much. You want them to care about that almost as more than the finish. So that's the fun part of it. And I had so many fun tag matches. Me and Jason versus the Bruisers, Gilligan Gordon and Matt Lomax, because the story was just so simple. You had these two big bruisers. Technically, me and Jason were technically better, but they'd cut us off and they would just beat us down until the crowd thought that was the end, and then you'd make them want that tag, and then when they got it, and some of the pops that we used to get. But tag wrestling, it's so different to just singles wrestling, and I don't think people really put as much thought into it as they should. They just think that it's four guys instead of two guys, and that's not it at all. There's a different story to tell, and it's just much more fun, and much easier to mess with the emotions of the crowd, so to speak, about bringing them up and taking it away from them and things. But yeah, tag wrestling is a lot of fun, and it's almost like a science unto itself. And it's always good to get in there with someone you've got good chemistry with. Since Jay sort of slowed down and only worked for Welsh Wrestling, I started doing tag wrestling with Charlie Sterling. And when you've got someone who you have good chemistry with, and then you're up against another tag team that you also have good chemistry with, and it's just almost, you can just create magic so easily.
What team have you had the best chemistry with whilst teaming with Charlie?
It would probably, and this probably won't surprise like a lot of the people who are wrestlers who might be listening to this, it would probably be the Hunter Brothers, who are probably the best tag team in Europe as far as I'm concerned. Like, working with those guys is so easy, whether they're a babyface or villain. It's just, it all flows so nicely. They know what to do, they know where to be. But I would say probably them, really, because you have to be working with a team who is who actually wants to work as a team. We've worked a lot of people who are just two singles guys who just get sort of maybe paired together, who don't necessarily, like they don't see that or they don't think about the chemistry so much. Whereas those boys are, they're brothers and they know each other inside out and they know their routine and they know tag wrestling inside out. So really it would have to be them since me and Charlie started tagging, really.
Is there a team on that bucket list for you and Charlie?
Not off the top of my head, and that's not to disparage anyone, just purely because me and Charlie have been so insular within Chaos. Like we tend to get put against other people and we just get told what to do. Like if we were taking the Lionhearts out there, I'm sure there would be, not the Lionhearts, sorry, the Crazy Teacups out there. If we were to be doing that, then I'm sure there would be tags out there that we would want to work with. But just because of the way that the tag has been and it being so insular to just Chaos when we got told what to do, it's not really something that I've put thought into, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, whilst on the topic of Chaos and you've reflected on what singles and tags was like, what's your thoughts on the more like hardcore, no DQ style match? Because I believe it was Chaos where you faced Tommy Dreamer.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about and what's your thoughts on that style of wrestling?
That came about, obviously Chaos would bring people in and they try to match people up as best as possible. And at the time where I was working as a villain, I was sort of what's the best way to put it? I was working against the establishment because I was campaigning for just pure wrestling, so to speak.
Okay.
And like I didn't like the dangerous moves and everything that people were doing in Chaos. I was basically trying to be the Bob Backlund of the mid-90s in Chaos. And so for them to put me against Tommy Dreamer was effectively sort of progressing my storyline in that it was everything that I was supposed to hate. With regards to hardcore wrestling, I wasn't a massive fan of it. As I say, like a lot of the people that I idolized and grew up watching were technically very good wrestlers who could tell a good story, and you get sucked into the story of a match without needing too much shenanigans, so to speak. They could just wrestle and you would just be absorbed in the wrestling. People like Bret Hart and people along those lines. And so hardcore wrestling was never something that I was a massive fan of. I would enjoy watching it now and again, it would be incorporated here and there. The WrestleMania 13 match, Bret and Steve Austin, is a hardcore match, effectively. It has weapons. And if used right, you can get sucked into it. But like if we were to go into like the ECW type thing, there were some incredible matches there. But in terms of like the dangerous aspects of it, or like CZW, for example, that type of stuff isn't for me. Like gore for the sake of gore. Not so much. Like if it furthers the story, like much like a cage match or something, then like it's the next step in a progression of a series or a storyline, then absolutely. But if it's just here's two guys, they're going to throw each other through panes of glass, then that's a turn off moment for me, or light tubes or something like that.
Yeah. So I want to move across to 5-star wrestling. Somewhat, I don't know how you feel of it, and we'll get into it, but somewhat a controversial company with how it had been dealings. But as mentioned before, like that was the first time I'd really came across your work because it was just on free TV. So like, how did the 5-star wrestling thing come around, and what's your thoughts on like the company?
The first time I encountered 5-star was when they first, I think it was they did something. They were trying to sign CM Punk for £1 million or $1 million or something. And they had the idea for a 128-man tournament or something along those lines. there was something, and the main reason I knew about it or I'd heard about it was because they'd cancelled a load of shows on guys who, I think a lot of those guys went on to do some stuff with NXT. I know the Coffee Boys were involved, and there were other people who were involved, and they had put up a lot of statuses about, how much of a joke it was and things like that. And so I had heard about it, but I didn't realize that's who it was because I didn't know anything about it at the time. But the way that it came up, and this is a strange thing, I got an email just from a random person, just, as you do, you just get bookings in your email, and it just came up and asked about a booking for a Thursday in early 2018. And there's not all that many shows that run during the week. So immediately it sort of piqued my interest as a Thursday, and he said to give him a call. So I gave him a call, and I can't, for some reason, my mind's gone blank as to what his name is. And I feel really bad for that because I did work with him quite closely when I got to 5-star, and it'll probably pop in my head in a minute randomly. So if I just shout someone's name randomly, it's because it's there. I just remember giving him a call, and much like yourself, I think he was a Geordie, so he was up in the northeast there.
Yeah.
And Daniel, there's his name, Dan, and he said that he had seen my promo pictures, and that it would be a great look for TV, and he had this grand vision, and he started laying out all these plans, and I was like, okay. I didn't know. At the time, I didn't know if any of this was serious or anything. He's just telling me all these ideas, and we were on the phone for like 45 minutes, and he's just relaying all this stuff off. And I'm like, okay, cool. Just send me some stuff via email, and we'll talk further when we get closer to it. And just over time, we just talked more and more. And then he started sending me promotional pics. And that's when I started realizing that he was actually very serious about these plans that he had. And then that's round about that time, because at the time you don't know, like if it's serious or not. So you just sort of drop a message to the group chat, and it's like, do any of you boys know what this is all about? And then that's when someone said, oh, that's that 5-star thing that failed last year or something. And then it all clicked in my head. So then you start getting extra cautious. So so I started asking more and more questions, and just really sort of, is this a good idea? Is it a good idea to be involved in it? But in my head, I needed to get some exposure somewhere, and a lot of the big companies were hard, like they still are hard to break into. I've never worked for Progress, ICW, or Fight Club Pro or anything like that. That's where you get some recognition. So in my head, when Dan started saying about we're going to do live TV, and we're going to have these ex-WWE guys, and like I have these plans and everything like that, like immediately you just think, well, maybe it might not have the best reputation, and in your head maybe it might not last for the longest period of time, but you just make the most of it for as long as you can and just make it work to your advantage. And so we got closer to the time, and Dan was saying about how he wanted to do an angle with me and Jack Swagger on the first Sheffield show. And that's really when I started working more like with Dan with regards to myself as a character with him. It was very much all the logistics of this is where we want to do shows, and this is what the plans are for TV and things like that. But that's when we started really sort of nailing down the what he wanted to do with Eddie Ryan, so to speak. And that's when I actually realized he'd never seen me wrestle, which was baffling. He had literally just seen the mask and the cape and the look, and just thought that would be a great look for someone on his TV show. And so started sort of nailing down and just really sort of working where he wanted to go with me. And so in terms of the experience, as I say, like he had these ideas, and so I just knew that I had to maximize everything and take advantage of absolutely everything I was given. And so he said that he wanted me to work with Jack Swagger, and so I just wanted to go out there, and because a lot of us knew that maybe it might not last for the full period of time that he had. It came to an end a bit quicker than we were anticipating, but I just knew that I needed to treat every show like it wasn't going to be another one afterwards. And so went out with Jack and wrestled Jack, and he had some great feedback for me. And then we just rolled on through the next one. I think it was Newcastle the second week, and I think I was on with PJ Black there.
Yes, so I've got a list here. I think so.
Okay.
Liverpool with Jake Hager on the first one.
That's it.
And then you had Newcastle with PJ Black. I just want to go back to, you mentioned he said he hadn't seen you wrestle before. When did you find that out?
It was in a conversation. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something that made my, raises an eyebrow. I think it was something to do with like he had an idea for like some moves he wanted me to do, and it became apparent very quickly in my head that I don't do those
star
moves.
presses.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Have you ever actually seen me wrestle?" And he's like, "No," and he was just so blasé about it, like, "No," like, okay, so I could be completely crap, and you're just going to put me out there in front of a live audience of potentially millions, and however many in the building, and I could just completely crap the bed in front of all of those people. It's not really a great start to your show, but so that's when I started doing some more training, like making sure I get in the gym, make sure I look good for TV, and just working on like my technique and just getting in a training school and just really nailing down stuff. Because if I went out there on that first episode and was crap, then not only would it look bad on me, but it would look bad on them that they were featuring me in such a prominent role on that first show.
Yeah. What was the feedback that Swagger gave you then?
He was, again, he was complimentary of the way that I moved around the ring and timing and just like the little bits that wrestlers notice when you're working with each other and things like that. And, and he just, like little pointers and little bits of feedback here and there, but he was very complimentary. And it's just weird when you come back and you have like Chris Masters and Rey Mysterio and people at the monitor, and you come back and they come over and they shake your hand, pat you on the back and say good job, and you just go off to your locker room and you're like, this is so strange. But as I say, like for me, this is, I get to work with these people and learn from them and make my product better, which these people have had amazing careers and they have all this knowledge that if I hadn't have done that, then I would never have picked up on that, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to work with these people and get this exposure that they're bringing the eyeballs. They're the ones that when you put on a, like if you put a page spread out and you've got a picture of Rey Mysterio, those kids are tuning in to watch Rey Mysterio. They're not tuning in to watch me. But if they do stay and watch the whole show, then I'm going to make sure that I'm as good as I can be so that I'm not just missed and just lost in the shuffle on the whole thing.
Yeah. So how did it feel going back to like Plymouth? I think it'd have been week 4, maybe. You're facing Hager again for the 5-star championship, but that's in the Plymouth Pavilions. Like, how did that feel being on national television?
Oh, that was incredible. That all came about again while I was talking to Dan, and he was laying out all these grand plans for these venues that he wanted to do. And it became very apparent that all of his venues were in the north because that's what he knew, so there was Liverpool, there was Newcastle, there was Manchester, there was somewhere in Ireland, there was Scotland. They were all really based anywhere above Birmingham. Yeah. And so I said to him, have you thought about going down south? And he was very sort of, I don't know. And I know I'm biased because I'm from there, but Plymouth is an incredible wrestling town. A lot of the places down there are. Exeter are a great crowd as well because not much travels down there. So when you do go, they're very appreciative of your efforts. It's not overexposed down there. So the fans don't expect you to, get dropped on your head 1 billion times in order to get a reaction. And so I was talking to Dan and I was like, he had a show which was going to be booked in week 4 and the venue cancelled. And so I said, you should look into going down into the Southwest because I think he would do very well down there. And he asked me to recommend somewhere. And immediately I said you should go to Plymouth, and he asked me what the best venues there were. And again, Plymouth doesn't have a lot of those type of venues. You either have Home Park, which is the football stadium, which is like 20,000, before you even put seats on the pitch, or Pavilions, which is the second biggest one, which is a 2,000 seater arena, which is built for concerts and gigs and things. And next thing I knew, maybe 3 or 4 days later, he messaged me and he was like, "Okay, we've got the Pavilions booked, and we'll make sure that, we make a big song and dance about you going back." So I was like, "Okay, that's going to be very cool." Because in my head, I always wanted to work in the Guildhall, because the Guildhall was where they used to run shows in for World of Sport and things like that. But Plymouth Pavilions was another one of those venues that was sort of on that bucket list, and was actually where I did my university exams. That's the only time I've ever been in there other than to wrestle. So it was cool, and obviously being a proud Plymouth boy, I was very excited to get to wrestle in front of such a big crowd. And when they started putting all the marketing together, and then he started telling me how well ticket sales were doing there, I knew that we were onto a winner there. And in comparison to the other shows that they did, like Sheffield and Liverpool and Newcastle, I think, were around about the 1,000 mark, 1,000 fans mark that came in, and they were massive, 10, 12, 15,000 seater arenas. And then they go to Plymouth and then put nearly 2,000 people and nearly sell the whole place out. And the general feedback was for that it was the best one that came across on the show. He immediately started looking to where else can I do in the South and the Southwest that can do this, because that was by far the best that it sounded and looked on TV. But just from a selfish point of view, it was great to go there and just wrestle in front of friends, family, and other people who, there's not all that many people who have come from the Southwest who have gone on to do things, so to speak, in sports, and someone for people to look up to. And it just sort of gave people, a little bit of inspiration if they wanted to just follow their dreams and things like that. And I know that was something that came up with a lot of people who, they said they first saw me on 5 Star, especially Plymouth, and, it really inspired them to do things. And for me, I've such great memories of that night. I know that by the end of that night, I was lying just in a pool of my sweat, because I'd wrestled for effectively an hour, where I did the big gauntlet match and then got about 20 minutes rest before then I went on to wrestle Jack Swagger afterwards. So it was great, but it was a hard night's work for me. They made me earn my money that night.
Yeah. So I think it kind of all came to an end, and I don't know if it's because of the Belfast show specifically, or if it was just because of so it was back in March 2018, a huge snowstorm that effectively shut down the UK, and it made a lot of the talent, specifically from the North area, which was predominantly quite a lot of his roster, was struggling to get across to Ireland. So what was that whole experience like, especially traveling from Plymouth, Swindon area to Belfast, Northern Ireland during that snowstorm, not knowing if you're going to have enough people for the show? What was all that like?
It was a lot of stress that day. There was a few days really. So they were very good to me, at least, in terms of having everything paid for. I was never owed money. Everything was paid for in advance for me. So the flights were all booked. I'd been sent the details. I was due to fly out from Bristol. I was supposed to meet Charlie and then fly out from Bristol. And then Bristol airport got shut down the night before. So I then started, speaking to the promoter, and he said, if there's any way you can get there, if you can transfer your flight to somewhere else, just do what you can. I would really appreciate it, because he'd obviously had people started telling him they weren't going to be there at that point. And so me and Charlie looked into it, and Birmingham airport was still open. So, we changed our flights to Birmingham, just literally maybe 9, 10 p.m. The night before we were due to go. And obviously our flight was, I think, maybe 11 a.m. So we had a few hours sleep, and then we had to get going. And so I remember on the way to the airport, It was early, probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, 8, 9ish. And there's a guy who was driving like a maniac down the outside lane. I saw him, and Charlie was half asleep, and I just sort of said out loud in the car, like, that guy's going to crash if he keeps driving like that. And he passed and then crashed, and it was unreal. And I just remember the look on Charlie's face, and we were just like, this is doomed. This trip is doomed. And so we drove in shock for about 10 minutes, just silence of what we just watched in front of us. And luckily we didn't get caught in it, otherwise we definitely wouldn't have been there. And so we get to the airport, the flight takes off, we land in Ireland, we get picked up and we get taken to the airport. Not the airport, the venue, sorry. And there are a few people there, and Dan's there, and the relief on his face that, he had two more people, and he was just, you could see that everything was sort of crumbling around him. And at that time, I remember Zach Gibson had been signed to NXT, and they told him that they didn't want him to work the show. And he said that he just wanted to do the favors to someone, because they built him up as one of the top British villains that they had. And he just, as a class act that he is, he said he wanted to do the honors before he went, and they'd been building me as the top British babyface. So he said that he wanted to do that for me. And so he could have very easily said sorry, but WWE have said no. But, he fought for it and said that he wanted to do the right thing before he left. And so they did that whole thing where they'd made a belt for him, and so they needed to do something with that. And I ended up with that Real Wrestling Championship, which was for him, but they needed to make the most out of it. So there was mixed feelings that show. Like, I'd always wanted to go to Ireland, especially Belfast, and so it was great to go there and wrestle, and we did the best that we could. Effectively, that's all we could do. We turned up and we did what we could for the people who could get there. But because me and Charlie had changed our flights from Bristol to Birmingham, it meant that we were sort of slim pickings for flying back into Birmingham. So everyone the next day left early in the morning, and me and Charlie were on an afternoon flight, which got cancelled. So me and Charlie got stranded there for another 2 days, which the promoter, he covered all the hotel expenses and everything, and that wasn't an issue. But yeah, me and Charlie got stuck in this beautiful little B&B in the middle of nowhere, just watching WWE Network. And then we just tried to make the most of our time. I went to the Titanic Museum and things like that just to occupy myself. So we made the most out of it. But that whole experience was very stressful. Very stressful. It was one of those ones where you look back on and laugh, and it's in the memories folder for wrestling. But at the time, it probably gave me a few more grey hairs than I wanted at the time.
Yeah, because I know that, I don't know if it'll be the same for yourself, but majority of the roster that had been booked out, promised dates for the next month, 2 months, because they were booking well in advance, received it wasn't a Facebook message, but an actual Facebook post in the 5-Star Wrestling private group page saying we're no longer moving forward with the shows. Nobody really got reached out. Did Dan actually contact you, or was that the way you found out as well?
No, I think Dan actually did take the time to drop me an email or a message. I do remember that I knew that it was coming. I did see the post, but I knew that it was coming before that. But I think that, because there were so many factors that went into it, like the TV. I think the TV side of it, the was it Free Sports was the channel?
Yes.
I think that they had stipulated about the venues, and they thought that if they just booked a few people like Rey Mysterio and stuff like that, that they would be able to fill up some big venues. I knew that they weren't planning on filling up the whole thing, because obviously they had the TV screens and everything, but at least half fill it with a few thousand people, like 5, 6, 7,000 people. But these are non-wrestling people, and they don't understand that it takes a little bit more than that. Yeah. And so I think once they've realized that they were hemorrhaging money for these venues so quickly, and probably the the best that they were probably aiming for was, as I say, the Plymouth show with 2,000 people was the best effort that they did. I think when they realized that it wasn't going to be as grand as it was, I think the TV show were just kind of, I don't know if we want to pursue this. I know that the guy who was funding it all, he wasn't short of money, so I don't know if that was it. But I think once he sort of got started, and it didn't start performing as they had hoped, and then it was getting panned because of what it looked like bad attendance. Because effectively, if you said, "Here's a wrestling show," there's 1,000 people in the crowd.
That's a good draw.
Yeah, out of context, that's great. But then you're like, yeah, it's a 15,000 seater arena. You're like, okay, then maybe that's not so good. So,
do you think it'd have been more successful if they booked smaller venues? So you mentioned the Guildhall earlier, and NGW up here, they use the City Hall where they sell out 1,400 people, and when they film their TV shows, it looks visually amazing. Do you think Five Star would have been more successful if they had smaller, jam-packed arenas rather than big arenas, which makes it look a lot smaller attendance?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, they had obviously illusions of grandeur, and they really wanted to, kind of like what I said earlier, like all or nothing. They really sort of wanted to get all in with what they were doing, and they thought that if they could just sort of hit the ground running and get some good starts, then they would be fine. But like with anything, you've got to start small. Wrestling is such a niche audience, and it takes a lot of time to build up that fan base. Even the most loyal of wrestling fans can be fickle at times.
Yeah.
And drawing them into a product that you want them to watch regularly, even if it is on free TV at a good time, takes time. So, if they had been maybe a bit more cautious and just said, "Oh no, let's try this to start and then build up," then absolutely it would at least look better on TV, and it would give people less of an excuse to pan it or to look negatively on it, which a lot of people sort of did from the start because of the first failed attempt, really. But there was a lot of potential, and it gave a lot of people some exposure, and some of the names that were involved in that, your Dave Mastiffs, your Rampage Browns, your Adam Maxteds, your Charlie Sterlings, all these people, your El Ligeiros, look what they've gone on to do. Yeah. So it's not like it's not like it was a crap product. It was there. It was just maybe not refined as best as it could have done. And if they had more wrestling people involved at the top end, they maybe might have managed it a little better. But it was just sort of mismanaged. And I can't ever say anything bad to Dan, because he was great to me. He gave me a great opportunity, and he was just someone with a lot of passion and a lot of vision, and unfortunately it just didn't pan out the way that he had hoped it would. And I wished it had worked out better. It would have worked out better because it would have worked out better for all of us who had jobs, and it would have given people more opportunity for exposure. And any promotion that closes is a bad thing for all of us, because it's one less place for us to work. So it's on live TV. How can that be a bad thing?
Yeah, no, 100%. And that was part one of the interview with Eddie Ryan. Make sure you check out part two, which we'll be talking about Reach Wrestling, the home promotion now in Plymouth, his time with NXT UK, and his remaining goals in professional wrestling.
Always use your head.